Okay, welcome to today's training. I know we have lots of new people. This will be their first training, over 200 of you, just over 200, because I didn't close it down quick enough. When we got to 200, I think there's 202 people that came in over the last week. So we now have over 500 people in here, which is mad. So welcome to all of you whose first training this is. I know some of you are on live and some of you on replay. Really great to have you here. How we generally do these trainings is I will introduce the speaker we have, and then there is a group chat open. Please post all your questions in there, and then if there is a time that I can interrupt that seems right, I will. If not, we will do questions at the end. And I know that both me and Anna have to be completely gone on time on this one, so we'll probably will do questions at the end. So I'd like to introduce today Anna. I've known Anna for probably a couple of years now, actually. Anna is the first person that I ever spoke to about podcasting at all. She knows exactly what she's doing. She just actually put a podcast out there and a book. Well, she's been podcasting for ages, but she's put a book out there. And your book got to what in the end?
#1 in 11 categories.
Oh,
it's still #1 now. And it's in the top 10 in 22 categories on Amazon right now.
Amazing. Congratulations on that success. And your podcast, when you first started it, that went pretty stratospheric pretty quickly as well.
So my second podcast, which we'll talk about today, when I launched this one just 2 months ago today, went to #3 in the UK for all podcasts and #9 globally for business.
Amazing. Congratulations. I'm going to hand straight over to you and take my my video off so that we can all be concentrating on you.
On me.
And I'll come back and ask questions at the end.
So just so you know, I've got a lot of slides because there's a lot that I want to share with you today. So if by whatever means I have to be away at 1, as Lisa said, if there are questions afterwards, then I will come into the group to answer all of the questions, because I want to make sure you guys get loads of value today. So if we do get cut short on the questions, I will make sure that you get everything answered.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Cool. Right. So I am now going to hop on to share my screen. And we're diving straight in, ladies. So why you should start a podcast. Actually, I'm going to just hide all of your videos as well, and me. So here we go. So why you should start a podcast? Well, podcasting is growing at a phenomenal rate. And I want you to think about this training. Maybe you're not quite there yet, but maybe you want to be a guest. And all the things that I'm going to share in the first maybe 10 minutes of this training is about really what you need to be thinking about in terms of being a guest as well, why that's really crucial to growing your brand and growing your business. So first of all, a podcast allows you to have impact, and it allows you to have authority within your space. It really does help you get your message out there. It helps you to collaborate. It helps you build some amazing opportunities. So to put this in context, Lisa and I actually met because I invited her onto my podcast when I was starting my first one 2 years ago. And we've kept in touch. We know each other. We're kind of in each other's networks. And, you know, I've spoken at Lisa's event. I've spoken on countless events because of my podcast and the level of connection that it allows you to build. So what I want to start with really is it's kind of the boring stuff in that it's the numbers, but actually this for me is really exciting because I want you to have a firm understanding of why podcasts matter right now. So first of all, who is it that listens to podcasts? So I know a lot of people still aren't on that podcast train. They haven't really got to grips with how it is and how they access them. But there are now 7.1 million people in the UK who listen to podcasts each week. This is according to a new report by Ofcom. In terms of the US, there are now 54% of the US population who listens to podcasts. But in the UK, we're just catching up with only 18% of our population. So 1 in 8 people worldwide are now listening to podcasts. So this is not some small fry little thing that people are doing on the side. This is really crucial to people's daily activities. the growth is exponential. So over the last year, from September 2018 to September 2019, there was an increase of 24% of listeners, and it has more than doubled over the past 5 years. I went to a training about podcasts just a week and a half ago with Spotify and Google Play, and they are expecting that the entire industry is going to double in size from what it currently is, completely double globally in the next 2 years. So you might think, oh, everyone's got a podcast, it's not worth me doing it. Well, you're completely and utterly wrong. The way that the industry leaders are seeing this is equivalent to how TV was in the first 10 years of TV being created as a medium. People didn't really know what to do with it. It is about to explode, and you want to make sure that you are one of the shows on there at the beginning. So half of all listeners have begun in the last 2 years. So it's a new medium still. Although as a concept, it's been around for 15 years. Its current format only 5 or 6 years. And it's really the last 2 years that it's really started to boom. In worldwide, there are only 750,000 podcast shows. And I find this really interesting because a lot of people say, well, why would I start a show when there's so many other shows? But nobody's thinking about that on YouTube. There are millions and millions and millions of shows on YouTube, but that doesn't stop anybody. 750,000 podcast shows that are currently hosted. But actually in the UK right now, there are only 580 shows that are going live with new episodes each week. And I don't think that that's many at all. So it's an exciting time to get involved. In terms of listeners, in terms of listener behaviour, it tends to be on average that podcast listeners are subscribing to about 6 shows, and that they tend to listen to 7 episodes a week. Now, what this means is that even though people are very loyal to their shows, there seems to be this pattern of having one kind of wild show that they're looking for per week, something new that they're going to try and test. And people are looking for new things to listen to all of the time. 80% have said that listeners have said that they listen to all or most of an episode. So to give context to that, or over on YouTube, people are only listening to watching 15 to 25% of the majority of YouTube videos that they watch. On podcasts, people tend to be very loyal and they tend to listen to the majority of the episode. Now, this is really important because it means that you are really able to establish your authority, establish your story in terms of monetization, if that's something you did look at later on, or even just promoting what you do in a very natural way, that the listenership is with you. They are going to listen to most of your content. So in terms of positioning for monetization and sponsorship, adverts that are placed right in the middle of a podcast are really, really valuable. And I'm not talking about, a radio style commercial. I'm talking about a deliberate placement by the host or by the guest. So these fans and listeners of podcasts are loyal and they are engaged. I love this stat, and as business owners, this is really important. 76% of people who are listening to podcasts that were taking part in a massive research project that was done about podcasting and audio in general said that they had and intended to follow up on an advert or a message they heard in a podcast with the intention to buy. So 76% are listening to podcasts and then deciding that they want to purchase or use a service. Okay, I think that's really fundamental, and that is a massive statistic. There is no other medium right now that has that kind of effect, and it's because of this know, like, and trust factor. So the demographics for podcast listenerships: 56% are male and 44% are female. Generally, they are fairly affluent. The majority of podcast listeners, although not all, are fairly affluent. So in the US, this means an income in the household of $60,000 per year and above. These tend to be educated people, although there are now many more podcasts that are kind of coming up in a wave of less educated and less affluent people, but the majority are there. The majority of listeners to podcasts have some money to spend. So how do they listen to podcasts? How are they doing that? This is really important when you start thinking about the show that you might put out there. 49% of people are listening at home, and they're doing activities such as the washing, they're doing the ironing, they're maybe listening on with earbuds so their children can't hear while they're doing the hoovering, they're listening maybe on their smart speaker now, with everything being connected up to Spotify in terms of podcasts and all sorts of other Alexa and wonderful gadgets. Podcasts are a part of that movement, and that's been a deliberate ploy by people like Google. 22% are listening in the car or whilst traveling. So a lot of listenership is commuter based, but that might actually be whilst doing the school run or whatever other travel is happening. So it's thinking about the pockets of time people are listening. And again, when it comes to creating a show, if you're going to look to create your own podcast, it's thinking about when your specific listeners are going to be listening and consuming what you do. So what this means for you. A podcast means that you can have much more influence. It allows tremendous amounts of collaboration. So as I've said, I, as a result, have had phenomenal reach on my own podcast. I've met some amazing guests that I've then gone into their memberships, which of course then builds my list and builds my brand awareness. I've spoken on many, many platforms at big events as well because of this collaboration. Now, I've just realized I can't actually see the chat box. So I'm just going to come out. Open my chat box so I can see it from now on.
I can ask if you want, so I can see it. So we've had one question so far. Is it a good idea to repurpose your YouTube videos into a podcast?
Yes. I'm going to come to podcasting later, to repurposing later. But yes, so it is definitely a good idea. You want to use your podcast to get as much of your content out there to a different audience. Although there are some people who cross over between YouTube and podcasts, some people really hate visual. People don't want or have the time to sit and watch a YouTube. So you're going to get a very different listener who still likes your content but doesn't want to watch you because they don't have time. At the same time, podcasts can also be visual. You can have the video element to it too. Personally, I create mine as just audio for now, but I then repurpose some of it as video onto YouTube. So you definitely need to be thinking about all of it as a package. It's just another way to get your message out there. It's massive for growth. If you create your podcast and things like the intro and the outro with the right intention. And for me, planning is absolutely key to that. So it's about increased visibility as well, increasing your visibility. So just this week, as part of my book launch, I've now been on, as of this morning, it's now been 10 podcasts over the last week and a half across everybody's platforms, across their listenership, their podcast downloads, across their social media, their Instagram, their Facebook. I reckon now, as of this morning, I've hit an extra 220,000 potential eyes and ears on my business and my brand in just 10 episodes. So that's not to say their listenerships are, in the 20,000s, but because of all the other platforms and how much people are promoting their podcast, each individual podcast episode, that's a powerful amount of people to have reached within a week. So there are potential for income and monetization through podcasts, and that's not necessarily through having adverts on it. So far to date, I have deliberately kept adverts off my podcast. That won't be my intention going forward, but I wanted both of my podcasts to grow to a certain level before I did this. You can get sponsorship. You can use affiliation links on pretty much everything that you mention and in your show notes. That is something I already do. So my podcast, from day one, I was making money from the podcast through affiliation links. I also monetize it because I often talk about my membership, and I don't send people to links about my membership, but then I get inquiries about it. And my podcast then becomes the top of my funnel. That's the free bit that people get for free. Then they come into my low cost membership, and then they end up coming right the way up into my mastermind. And people are finding me because of my podcast. So common objections I hear about podcasting are that people are too busy, and they've got a lot going on and they don't want yet another thing that they feel they have to do. People are afraid that it's too technical, that they don't have the skills or the knowledge or the equipment or the kind of mind space in order to do this. And what I'm passionate about showing people is that a lot of the technical geeks out there want to put you off because they love the tech, and it actually doesn't have to be that difficult. I'll talk to you a little bit about my background in a moment, but I have a massive wealth of experience within audio. And one of the things that used to really bug me within that industry were the amount of people who would try and put beginners off and say, well, you need to have a £10,000 studio before you can get started. And I knew it was rubbish because I was working for some of the top brands around the world with a £100 microphone. And I guess back then I wasn't perhaps confident enough to say what you're saying is a load of bull. But coming into this space, I know that as long as you understand a little bit about the equipment, which is what I'm passionate about teaching people, this doesn't have to be a massive headache. We can make it really simple. So other people worry that they've maybe not got enough to say to maintain a regular show. And what I would say about this is, if you are creating social media posts, if you are writing a blog, if you are ever going on and doing Facebook Lives, you are already creating this content. You are already putting it out there. And this is just another way to do it. And if you're worried that you on your own don't have enough to say, then really look at having guest interviews as part of your model. Because then it's not you that has to be doing all of the saying. You just have to understand what it is that your audience wants to hear. So I'll answer the questions at the end, I think, if that's okay. But just keep writing them there and then we'll come to them at the end. So the other thing is people worry that the market is too saturated. And I think, as I've just pointed out, if you were here for the stats earlier, that is not the case. Yes, there are a lot of people podcasting, but there are also a lot of people who are not. And this is an underused market at the moment. Speak to me in 2 years' time, that might be a very different place to be. But right now is the time to get on it. This is a fear that crops up for people. I don't have the right voice for radio. And what I'm going to say is that it's absolute nonsense. One of the reasons people absolutely love podcasts is because they feel like they're that fly on the wall in the conversation. They feel like they get to know the host a little bit more. They like your quirks. They like your mannerisms. I deliberately, even with all my audio knowledge, I deliberately don't cut out my stumbles, my pauses, my ums, my ahs. The only time I edit those things out is if I think it's a distraction for the viewer. But it's that vulnerability and that essence of the real me that people like to listen to. So don't worry about that. What's important is your message and what you have to share. The other thing people worry about is they don't have a massive following at the moment. Well, this is, as I said, one of the best ways to piggyback off other people's audiences, because if you have a show, if someone of more influence than you has a much bigger audience than you, wants to promote their course, wants to promote their membership, has a book coming out, or has their own podcast they want to promote, they know they need eyes on and ears on their own content. And one of the best ways to do it is to get on other people's podcasts. And what happens if you run a podcast? Well, you promote it everywhere that you can. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about the following. This is the best way to grow your business. So now is the time to start a podcast. I've got some interference here. Can you all hear that as well? I've got one of those things.
Tiny bit, hardly anything this time.
So I've got one of those things, Lisa, where the only people who ever ring the landline are my mother, who knows I'm recording, and the school. So I'm slightly concerned that I might be having a phone call from the school. So we'll just roll with that, ladies, and let's hope they don't ring back. So now is the time to get started in podcasting. And what I wanted to share with you now is why I know what I'm talking about. I'm not just another podcaster who's just kind of gone, I'm going to give you a bit of training and jump on the bandwagon. So I have 15 years experience of working in audio, and I've worked and won many awards and nominations in Hollywood for voiceover work, for commercial work, very, very high end, across the UK, across the whole world, across the US. I've worked on international best-selling audiobooks, over 150 of them. I've won multiple awards for this. In fact, this photograph here was taken 3 years ago. Just to the side of it is the red carpet in LA, and I've been a finalist there 7 times now for the work that I've done. And I actually thought this particular night that I was leaving the audio world behind me, that I'd done everything I was going to do in audio and in voice work, because I wanted to come into this coaching space and this entrepreneurial space and show people how to have more success and more visibility. And what I've worked out along the way is that I wasn't leaving it behind. Actually, there's a massive underserved market of people who perhaps have started a podcast but aren't doing it properly, or want to start a podcast and have no idea about audio. And so actually now I'm really passionate about helping helping people spread their message in that way, because I like to help people have more impact. So when I launched this is my second podcast. I have 2 that are currently live on iTunes at the moment. This one, when it launched, went to number 3 podcast in the UK across all categories, and was number 9 podcast in business globally across iTunes, which I still can't believe. And what was amazing about that, I'll show you in a moment if I manage to drop the picture in time, is where that then positioned me alongside other people. So my podcasting journey actually started on the 22nd of January 2017. No, 2018. So not even quite 2 years now. And I was running at the time Inspiring Mummy Club, which was the idea I had while I was in Hollywood. Because I thought that my journey was really about helping other mums kind of pick themselves up and have more inspiration. And so because audio was no barrier for me, I literally just whacked up a podcast within 2 days. But I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to launch. I didn't really understand about the podcast, world at all. And that podcast did okay, but I had no idea about what I was doing. And so about 6 months in, I decided that I really needed to change my message. I no longer wanted to work just in the mum space. And that is because I already had lots of listeners. I didn't want to just kind of leave that listenership. So I rebranded about a year ago to Inspiring Success Podcast. I still hadn't done a lot of research into podcasting and how I really wanted it to work. And this evolved with me and with my work. So it was rebranded. I actually changed like my intro and I changed the branding for it, but I still hadn't really spent a lot of time doing this. Now, over the last year, I have invested tens of thousands of pounds learning everything I can about this field, because I came to understand that there were many people, particularly in America, earning millions of pounds per month as a result of their podcast. And I decided, well, they know no more about audio than I do. All they know how to do is how to launch and promote. So I basically spent the last year working out how to do this, and then obviously bringing in my audio experience as well. Now, when I launched that podcast, the second one, Entrepreneurs Get Visible, I knew it was to support this book launch. And as a result of the success of that podcast, I got this book to number 1 in 11 categories across Amazon. It outranked Alan Sugar, David Walliams, Gary Vee, Simon Sinek, which was insane. And I put this success down to, 1, it's a great book, you should read it, but 2, because I had done the groundwork with getting myself out there and positioning myself as a leader within my field, which I'll show you some of the images here. Oh, I didn't put them in. Annoying. So my podcast was rated as one of the top shows and was promoted alongside and above Gary Vee and Tony Robbins, which because I had so much success during that launch week, iTunes was then pushing it out to other people and making it as a recommendation. They sent emails about it. It was in everyone's feed. I was one of the second show that they were recommending in top shows across iTunes, not just in business and entrepreneurship categories, which is just phenomenal. But that is the power of podcasting and launching well when you know how to do it. So where do you start? So this is really the kind of the thing that if you're going to take notes today, this is where you really want to start with the notes. So for me, it's all about the planning. The only reason my second podcast has had so much success is because I understood I didn't do enough planning first time round. So you want to be thinking about the style of your podcast. What is the purpose of your podcast? This is paramount. What is the purpose for the listener, and what is the purpose for you in terms of your business? Because I see so many people who don't have a clue about this and, I'm just going to do a podcast, get my message out there because it's just another thing. But they don't tie the podcast into the core of their business. So it sort of sits there, not doing a lot, not really growing a lot, and not funneling and channeling people into paying areas of their business and not really elevating them. So what is the purpose for your listener? Why would they listen? What are they going to get out of it? What are they going to learn? What are they going to take away? Predominantly, people are coming to listen to podcasts to be educated and to be entertained. So how can you make sure that you get either one or both of those elements into your podcast? You have to think long and hard about that ideal client avatar, about who that listener is, who might be just a kind of subcategory of your ideal client that's standard for your business. You need to be thinking about, when are they listening? What are the time pressures they have? How busy is this person? So for me, this really informed with my second podcast that I want none of my episodes to be longer than 35 minutes absolute tops. And the majority of my episodes are actually 10 or 12 minutes, because that was the amount of time that I believed that people had available to them. And when we look back at that stat of 80% of people stop listening to a podcast episode potentially about 80% of the way through, no matter the length. This is because of their commute journey time, or perhaps they have a very small window for a cup of tea or between coaching clients or something like that. So if you understand the activity, the exact activities, and put yourself in their shoes, how long do they have? What are they listening for? How quickly do they need that information? Then it will inform the style of your show. So you'll notice on Entrepreneurs Get Visible, I don't do a long rambly waffle about how my week has been. If I'm going to mention any of that stuff, it's going to be later on. I get straight into the point of what we're talking about and the quickest result, the way that they're going to get that result, because that is what my listenership wants. So then you have to consider, am I just doing audio or am I doing a video podcast? So there are pros and cons to both. For me, I chose audio because my listeners don't have time.
Oh, I think we may have lost Anna. Gail, I'm looking at you. Can you hear Anna? No, okay. Hopefully she'll come back. It must be her Wi-Fi must have dropped her end. Let's just wait and see if she returns. It's the first time that's ever happened. Let's wait for a bit. I know you asked Gozzy about podcasts filming their sessions, and we touched on it a little bit at the beginning. I've had some podcast training with some other people who have said that it's a really good idea to record your sessions, because you might use them on other things as well. Right, so it looks like Anna's dropped off, so I guess she'll come straight back on. Wait a second. But yeah, I did just to tell you what happened with me, my podcast. Some of you might have might know that the beginning of this year, yeah, she'll realise she's gone. The beginning of this year, I started a podcast. And oh, hi, Anna, I'm just filling in with my podcast story.
Oh my God, I hate Wi-Fi.
It's all right. Yeah, I was just saying, I started a podcast at the beginning of this year, and what you were saying about how actually you need to know exactly why you're doing it, like the strategy bit. I didn't. I did exactly what you said and said, well, it's just another medium to get my message out. Yeah. And it completely failed. And it didn't fail on listeners. It failed because I didn't enjoy it, because I didn't really know why I was doing it. Yeah. So I was doing it.
That was it, and it becomes a headache then. Yeah. So I've been like that with my previous podcast, because I didn't understand its potential.
Yeah.
Didn't understand its potential and how to work it. Whereas now this is my core business function. And that's a very different beast. But you know, that doesn't detract from the fact that I've got memberships, that I've got other things coming out of that I'm coaching, that I've got masterminds. It's just that I now understand how to do this. And the only reason I went away and did that, Lisa, was because I couldn't understand why my show wasn't flying. Why wasn't it? Like, I'm creating great content, I've got great audio, what's the problem here? But it's like any part of business, you can't just wing it. You can for a while.
Strategize it, and that's what I didn't do. And so I shut mine down after 8 episodes, and I may do another one in the future, but for now, like, because it's not a burning part of my strategy, I've just let it go. And I think that's the right thing to do.
But when you think, Lisa, that you are now putting out great content on YouTube, your amazing YouTube videos, every single one of those could be repurposed onto a podcast, and you're growing your listenership. But you have to understand what you're doing with it, and that's one of the things I went away. I learned the hard way with this. I got it wrong. Not wrong, because my podcast was still doing well, and I still had thousands of listeners and thousands of downloads, but it wasn't working for me in the way that I knew it had the potential to. So, right, let's crack on.
Okay.
I hope to goodness I don't go down again. It's so annoying, isn't it, when that happens? But I promise you, I'm coming back. I'm coming back in.
For you.
So let me just switch this off chat. I've got so much to say on this today. I hope we do get through all of it. So, right, here we go. Oh, those questions dropped out for me, so I can't see all of them now.
Don't worry, I will ask the questions at the end.
Okay, so you need to be thinking about, are you going to do a solo style show? You'll see on my show, I now deliberately, the first 30 episodes were me and what I want to teach, because strategically, I'm going to use them in every Facebook group chat that comes up about a problem, in every email that I send out. I'm going to send people to something. In my nurture sequence, it's going to be a podcast episode that will take them under 10 minutes to listen to. So you need to be thinking about that. So there are other things, you know, in terms of interviewing, it's so powerful. I've now got myself potentially, from my own interviewees that I've had on this new show, already got myself potentially in front of over 1 million people, and I've only done seven interviews so far. It's strategic. It's absolutely strategic. So let's go on. So what is the purpose of the podcast for you? So for me, it was always authority. It was about up-leveling. It was about pitching myself against the best. So there's some ego in there. You'll find out a little more about me as we go through today. But if I'm going to do something, I want to do it well. And so if it's not working for me, I want to work out how to fix it. And that's essentially what this new model for me is like. What's in it for your listeners? What are they taking away? I don't have a lot of time to listen to lots of really, really rambly podcasts. I just don't have the time. But if you give me something that I'm going to learn, teach and take away in under 15 minutes, I'm going to listen. So you've got to think, who are your listeners and why are they showing up to your show? And that might be very different for everyone's businesses. So the other things you need to be thinking about conceptually, and also in terms of standing out, is the branding and design of your podcast. So this includes the artwork, going away and doing your research about other podcasts in your space. Who is your podcast going to be positioned alongside? How are you going to make those colours pop so that they're different to everyone else, but they don't look incongruous? So it's that fine art of, how do I stand out but look the same? What can you do with your description, and your title, which effectively has keywords built into it, a little bit like you might have your description of your show on YouTube, for example. How can you make sure that's got all the keywords in it you need for your search engine optimization? How can you make sure your title tells people what they're going to get, what they're coming for? All of this stuff really counts, and this is planning. The planning stage is absolutely key. How does this then inform your music and your intro? Are you going to have music? Are you just going straight to the point? How much of yourself are you going to promote yourself on the intro? And also on your outro as well. Where are you guiding people towards? What are you driving them towards? So this has to be thought through. It's not just something that's whacked up out there, which is how I did it first time. So if you're going to do interviews, you've got to think, who do I strategically want to have on my show? This is something you really need to give thought to. It takes a while to set up great interviews. You want to be thinking about the interview structure. You want to make sure that you get your guest story out there, but that they don't dominate, that you have enough interview skill, that you are asking questions but not reading from a list, that you have enough confidence in yourself and what your podcast is about to ask insightful questions as they come up with your guest, which is more challenging than you would think. But if you allow yourself to have these wonderful conversations and to allow them to evolve, but with you and your guest understanding the value you're trying to bring to the listener, with the listener in mind from the word go, then the most incredible conversations happen. So it's thinking about equipment and preparation, really. So as an absolute, my biggest tip is, it's not even fussing about the microphone. Of course, that's important, and we'll come to that in a moment. It's making sure that you have, if you're recording at home, a recording space that is quiet. Now, obviously, I'm sitting in a recorded booth, right? In a recording booth in my house that used to be my airing cupboard. And the reason it's here is because I was in a wheelchair for a long time, which is kind of part of why I got into audio so much anyway. I was a performer, and then I was told I might not be able to walk. So I threw myself into this whole audio and voice space. You don't need a room like this, but what you do need to make sure is that you don't have a noisy space, that you're not right next to a window where there's traffic going by, that you've not got the rubbish truck outside hurtling down the road, that you haven't got really noisy aeroplanes that you can hear. You need to make sure you've not got like noisy plumbing. So I have to make sure if my neighbours flush their toilet, it drives me nuts because I can't then record, because it for the next 20 minutes it's rumbling through, and that picks up in the audio. And those things you can remove, but the audio is never going to be as clean. You want to be thinking that you don't want to record in a room that's got, for example, a wooden floor or a tiled floor, because sound waves bounce off that and the sound can be really harsh and it sounds like really cavernous, and you don't want that. So there are things you can do to improve it. One, try and make sure you're recording in a carpeted room or an enclosed space. Particularly if you're doing solo, you can even, get inside your wardrobe or have duvets around you to make the best quality sound that you can. iTunes is going to become a lot hotter over the next couple of years about quality audio, so it is important to be mindful of it. But we'll talk a bit more about that as we go on. So in terms of recording, how are you going to record? So if you're doing it from home and you're doing interviews or a solo episode, this is the microphone I'm actually recording with right now, and I think it's a good microphone for getting started with. This one is approximately, I think it's about £120 at the moment. It comes with a stand, which is useful. You'll see the dials on it. There's all sorts of different ways that this microphone can pick up sound. So this works for not just your own voice, but if you did actually have a guest in the room with you, or you were doing a roundtable discussion that you wanted to record, this microphone can become omnidirectional. So you could use it for all sorts of purposes. This actually is called a USB microphone. There are others called XLR, but a USB microphone basically slots directly into your Mac or your laptop, so you don't have anything else to fiddle with and worry about. The other thing I recommend is a pop shield, and either this or a foam like header, what do they call them, a foam cover to go over the microphone. These are vital because whenever we speak, we use lots of air, particularly when we say the words P, the letters P and the letters B. All sorts of pops come out. They're called plosives, and it puts air into the microphone, which can distort your audio, and that's not fixable in the edit. So having a pop shield just makes sure that any enthusiastic speaking you're doing doesn't damage the quality of your audio. And then the final thing that I think is an absolute must is good headphones. And for me, I would be investing at least £50 on a good set of headphones, so that you are here. And I tend to record all my podcasts with my headphones on. The reason is our head, when almost prevents us from hearing external sound. Now that might sound a bit weird, but when you have headphones on, you are picking up all sorts of things to do with your own mouth noise, if you've not had a drink, if there's pops in your own voice, if there are problems down the line with the audio, if you're interviewing a guest, you wouldn't hear them until the edit if you didn't have headphones on. So I would definitely recommend always using headphones when you record. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about recording on the go or doing this on a very simple budget, because I'm a big believer it doesn't have to be rocket science. And the simplest way to get going, if you don't have much budget but you want to do it, is to get yourself a really good, what's called a lapel mic or lavalier mic. I think that's how you say it. And you can literally plug these straight into your iPhone. And I actually have one that's by iRig, and I can get 2 microphones onto it. It's not this exact one in the picture, but you can kind of piggyback on them. So I could interview anybody when I'm out at a conference or an event, or I've done episodes when we've been driving in the car before, and we've just recorded it straight into an app on my phone, and then I've uploaded it to Dropbox or something similar. I actually tend to, whenever I do a Facebook Live and it's a little bit off the cuff, I tend to have one of these microphones on me, because if I'm doing a live and there's a chance it could be repurposed, then I'm going to make sure I've got better quality audio than just on my iPhone. I also have done episodes where I'm literally out walking my dog and it might be a bit windy, and I will literally say, okay, so today's podcast episode, I'm doing this while I'm out walking the dog. I'm taking you on the journey. This is where I am. This is what I can see. And then people don't mind that there's some background noise because they understand. And actually, I get really good response from those as well. So don't think that you have to spend a fortune on your equipment. Now, a lot of professional podcasters, in fact any podcaster is a professional, anyone podcasting, lots of people use a similar set to this. It's called an H4n Pro, and you can either connect much fancier microphones into it, or you can use, it's actually got 2 microphones on the top as well, and you could just use this, and then you have to then transfer the audio to your Mac or your PC or some other place where you're storing your audio. I think these are great, and I do have one. Personally, I find it a bit of a faff because I don't always have it with me. The audio quality might be slightly superior to the iPhone, but by the time iTunes has compressed anything, at the moment, I think you'd be hard pushed to notice that there was any difference. That's my personal take on it right now. iTunes, as I said, are rapidly developing what they're offering. So in 2 years' time, I might be saying never record on your phone, but right now, I do think it's fine to do that. So my current recommendations, if any of you wanted to get hold of this, are available here at annaparkernaples.co.uk/podcast checklist. Is that podcast checklist? It comes out to you, I think, there's a checklist on how to launch a podcast, but also the recommendations for the equipment. I do update it from time to time, so there's always my current recommendations. Oh, can't get to the next. It's not letting me do anything now. Go back to my share. Don't you just love technology? It's not letting me share. I've not even told you half the stuff yet. Is this all good? Is everyone getting value from this so far?
No, I think we're definitely going to have to bring you back on for a Q&A.
Oh, I think so. I can't even see now. Has it? Oh, okay. My Mac's done something special. You know, when it closes something down that you're actually working on. Oh, come on. Okay, hang on. No, I don't want that one. Hang on, technical hitch here. Let me just. Oh, it says it's playing it to you. It's not though, is it?
No, it's not.
You can't see it. It thinks it's playing it to you. Hold on. Let's go again. And here we go. I don't know why it did that. Awkward. Right, so that's the podcast checklist. So in terms of software, this is how you are potentially going to record your podcast or edit your podcast. Most of you are probably using this anyway, but for interviews, use Zoom or use Skype. It's as simple as that. As long as you have a good microphone connected and the other end, your interviewee has a good microphone connected, then you're okay. Absolute worst case scenario, if you interview someone and they don't have a microphone, if they have the Apple earbuds, that actually has a microphone that is not great, but it's better than it would be directly from the Mac. So record on Zoom if you're doing interviews. In terms of editing, or you're doing solo episodes, I would recommend downloading either of these, Audacity or GarageBand. They're both free. Audacity is for PC and Macs, and GarageBand is usually on a Mac for free anyway. And you just need to get familiar really with how to press play, pause, stop, and then cut, so that you can delete a little bit like you would on Pages or Word or something like that. It isn't as hard as you think it is. So go in, get those programs and have a little bit of a play around. You can't really go wrong with them. So in terms of the editing then, these are the programs that I recommend: Audacity, GarageBand. The industry favorite is Adobe Audition, which if you have the Creative Suite, it comes as part of that. Personally, I don't use it, even for the epic amounts of audio that I've recorded, produced and edited, which I think now is close to 10,000 finished hours. I haven't used anything like that because I think it's overkill for voice. It's fine if you've got track after track after track, but I don't think it's necessary. And I like people to use the free software, because why would you pay for it? One of my favourites actually is Twisted Wave. It's a software that you can actually get on your phone as well and on your iPad. You do have to pay for it, but it's not a lot of money, and I think it's brilliant and super easy to use. So once you've actually got your episode recorded, you do need to think about meta tags. So these are essentially what your keywords are going to be, and this is how it the audio itself gets labelled in this way. So when it gets pulled into iTunes or across anywhere on the internet, your audio is already stamped with these particular stamps. So entrepreneurship, marketing, business, whatever the specific topic might be, you want to make sure that you've put those meta tags on there. And I use something called ID3 Editor, which I think cost me £10, and then I can use it for absolutely every episode that I ever create. In terms of hosting your podcast, so lots of people end up using some of the free software like Anchor, where you can just whack up a podcast for free. But I would really challenge people not to do it for free, because you don't end up owning your content, and they can put adverts that have nothing to do with your show all over it, and you don't own the episode anymore. My preference currently is Libsyn, because it has lots of functionality. It's also the kind of the leader within the field. It pushes automatically to iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher. I think there's about 15 places it automatically can send your podcast to if you want it to. So definitely go with Libsyn. In terms of setting up then, once you've got your hosting account, you want to go over to Apple, and you have to actually have an iTunes account to do it. And you then log on, you find the Apple Podcast Connect, and you create an account within that. And you then set up your podcast on there. But you have to have already done the part in your host. So iTunes then asks for your RSS feed, and you put that in there, and it takes about 72 hours to a week for Apple to approve your show. They're pretty strict on their requirements, so you do need to make sure that you're really thinking about everything, the brand work, the descriptions, the artwork, because if it doesn't go through first time, it can be a bit of a headache. But that's how you do it. You want to make sure that you're being pushed out to iTunes, Google Play, Spotify and Stitcher as an absolute basic, because they are the predominant forces within the industry right now. Spotify is growing at a phenomenal rate. They basically last year went out and bought loads and loads of small podcast hosts, and they are planning to try and match iTunes. They want to have 50% of the market within quite a short space of time. iTunes right now has 95% share. So I think we're going to see a lot and hear a lot from Spotify. So show notes are really important for a podcast, and I didn't do this to start with. I just used to whack up the audio version of a podcast onto my website. But with show notes, it's building your search engine optimization. So we all know how important that is. It's that domain authority. It's having that footprint. It's allowing you backlinks as well, if it's all on your show notes. Show notes are important, and this is where you can monetize through your affiliation links and your sponsorships, because people are mentioned in your show notes as well as on your show. Repurposing. So I know we've already had a question about this. I think it's absolutely vital, because you can be repurposing your Facebook Lives, your YouTube videos. If you ever do any speaking gigs or workshops, you can take sections of what you've done on stage or in a workshop room, and you could have recorded it live. You do an intro, you do an outro. You've got a podcast episode without any extra work. And that is really important. If you've already got a bank of blogs, each of those is a topic that you could probably talk about very easily, and you're then repurposing your content and getting your message out there even further. Now, some people I know don't want to learn the audio. They don't want to be bothered with the show notes, and that's okay, because you can outsource almost all of it. Personally, I think you do have to have an understanding of the very basic audio editing, so that one, you can keep track of what your outsourcers are doing and you know they're doing a good job, so you've got the language to communicate with them, but also you want to have an understanding of what those mechanisms are for when you're recording yourself, so you know whether you're going to be getting good quality audio or whether it's peaking or distorting. So what I like to teach people is the absolute fundamentals that you need to be looking at, not so that it's a worry, but just so you feel a little bit more informed before you're then getting someone to outsource to do everything else for you. So my show now, I have a team of 3 people who look after my podcast. So other than recording the episodes, I do nothing. And I would highly recommend that people consider that, but you do have to know the basics first. So crucially, you need to learn how to launch. Launching your podcast, you get a very short window for your show to have an epic amount of views, likes and listens. That first 8 weeks of your launch, you need to go hard and fast. And that isn't just, that's 8 weeks of it actually being live. Your launch really needs to start about 6 weeks before. So if you're going to put a podcast out there, you need to give yourself a window of about 14 weeks to really make your show successful. And there's lots of mechanisms around that. But essentially, you want to try and trigger getting your show into new shows, and then into top shows, and then finally into new and noteworthy. They are the 3 kind of big categories on iTunes. You might not be able to do it because a lot of it depends on who else is launching, what other big shows have got things out that week. But you want to think really long and hard about your launch campaign and how to make the most of it. So this is what happened for me. So as you can see here, I reached the top charts for, this was the global one, is number 10. And my show was then promoted alongside Tim Ferriss and Tony Robbins, which was slightly bonkers. I actually overtook Gary Vee just a few days after this as well, which is insane that, you know, I'm just me. I don't have a massive multi-million-pound company yet, but that here I am with these American giants because of the power of my launch. So yeah, so you want to get into top shows, and new and noteworthy, and that can only come during your launch period. So we've talked a little bit about monetization, the options you have for affiliations, for sponsorship, for bringing in speaking engagements, for collaborating with other people. There are so many ways you can monetize your podcast even without adverts. So I've talked a little bit about sponsorship and affiliations. It's the collaboration and connection that is just absolutely crucial, and a podcast is a way to bring that into your business in like no other. So here's just a few people that I've connected with recently on my podcast or for my other podcast. Lisa was one of the first guests on my original show. She's coming on very soon. I've had Carrie Green on. I've had Rob Moore on. Andy Lupata runs, he's got a massive UK network of people. He was on the show. And people want to be on the show. People want to be on your show if you've got a good product and they know they can reach a different listenership than they're already reaching. So this is just one final thing I'm going to leave you with. I am in the new year launching a new podcast membership to help people be great guests, even if they don't want their own show. There is a knack to it, and you do need to know the fundamentals to get it right. How to start a show that actually has a good launch, how to revitalize a podcast that they've put out and they hate and it's just that massive headache, how to make this work so that you can then look at sponsorship and monetization. So if any of you want to find out about that, we're opening at the end of January. You're only the second group of people that I've told about that, so it's almost an exclusive. But I'm going to stop my share now, and hopefully we've got a few minutes for some, I was going to say for some photos, but that's not what I mean, is it?
There are some questions. Let's see how quickly we can get to them in 5 minutes. Sorry guys,
Yes.
if we don't get through them all. Right, let me go back up.
Right at the top.
Yeah. When you upload a podcast, does it reach a global audience automatically, or is it country specific?
Yes, it does. However, how much it gets promoted depends on how hard and fast your launch and promotion is around it. So yes, it does go international. So I now have had listeners in, I think, 51 countries in just 8 weeks. So yes, is the answer.
I think you've answered this. Would it work doing it outside?
Yes.
I want to do walk and talk interviews. You have answered that.
Yes.
I see a lot of podcasts film their sessions. We talked about that. My question would be, with your first podcast, are you planning on doing some additional episodes, or are you only going to be creating new content for your new podcast?
My other podcast will stay there for search engine optimization because it's brand authority as well. But no, I won't now be adding anything to that podcast because it doesn't serve my business purposes in the same way.
I've recorded 3 podcasts so far. My podcasts are for primary school children, and I guess some parents will listen too. Will this be more tricky than an adult audience? Hopefully, as audiobooks are popular, podcasts for children will be attractive too.
Yes, I think podcasts are growing. There are many adults who want their children to listen to free content. So in just like any other thing, get it out there, get it done. And actually, I don't think there's as many people in that category, so you can probably really make it stand out.
Yeah. What are your suggestions about picking a title? For example, I was considering naming it the same as my book.
What's your book title? Does it have a call to action, and is it clear what it does on the tin? So my podcast, Entrepreneurs Get Visible, it does what it says. Inspiring Mummy Club was actually not bad as a title because it does what it says on the tin. But, you know, if you've got something that's a bit wishy-washy, Inspiring Success wasn't great. Yes, it maybe says what it does on the tin, but it doesn't give someone an action to take, if that makes sense.
It does.
So, yeah, anything else?
Which app do you use for recording into your phone? Could you also do this into your phone video camera?
Yeah, I don't see why not, as long as you've got a good microphone. As long as you had a good lapel mic, yes.
Is GarageBand
I use Twisted Wave on my phone if I was recording it on my phone.
Is GarageBand the audio equivalent to iMovie?
Yeah. Yeah, in a nutshell, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And if you've used iMovie, you already understand about how the audio fits together. So you're just looking at a much simpler version of that.
Yeah. How do we extract the audio from the video on a live? Do we upload it to an app like GarageBand?
So for me, for example, if I was taking this video, I would just download the whole video and then I would open it in Audacity, and Audacity would only take the audio. And then I would save it as an MP3 or a WAV file.
Cool, and do it that way. It sounds like if your questions are quite complex, maybe this membership is going to be perfect for you that Anna's got, because I'm sure we'll be going through those kind of things in there. Brilliant, that's the end of the questions. We did manage to get them all in.
I talked very fast, I'm sorry, but I just wanted to share it all.
It's been brilliant, it's been really, really helpful for me as well, and we can always bring you back in for a secondary session if people on replay have lots of questions as well. So,
yeah, absolutely, more than happy to do that.
To coming onto your podcast in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I know, we had to rearrange, but yeah, we'll get that done in January, so it's good.
It's fun. To start listening, guys. That'll be okay, I'm going to let you all go. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it was a lot of information in a short space of time, but this will be up in your members area by tomorrow morning, so you'll be able to listen to your heart's content. Any questions that you have, those of you watching on replay, do please put them in the group. I can always ask Anna or bring it in. So
yeah, absolutely, but come and ask, and if I can, I'll help you. If not, I'll point you in the right direction.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming on, Anna. Really nice to see you again.
All right, take care, Lisa.
See you guys.